Hello, everyone. Welcome to XYZ Podcast, and we are happy to be back again in year 2022. It's February, and it's been a while since our last episode. So I remember there was the interview with Edward Tan from a practice in China and also in Malaysia as well. So now, because to kick off a new episode, I have been always wanted to do an episode, something very refreshing. And interestingly, I somehow came across Instagram and their Daniel. We somehow talk a little bit over Instagram, and then very interesting that we have certain mutual connections and also some friends that we know within our community. And then we had a very brief conversation when I was in Glasgow, I think in last August. And finally, we managed to arrange a time for this episode. So Daniel, Ismail, and happy to see you here and welcome. How are you doing, Daniel?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's good to
How
see
are
you.
you,
Yeah,
Gary? It's good to
I'm
see
good,
you too.
good. Yeah. So now
Yeah,
you are based in KL.
yeah.
But even though before that we were talking about your involvement in Turkey, and you are actually teaching. Are you still teaching in Turkey University?
Actually, no. I left last last year. I left last year, early last year, and since then I'm continuing here lah in Malaysia. I'm teaching at a local university here. Yeah,
ab- about interior architecture.
yeah, interior architecture. Yeah,
Yes. So and then we had a conversation and then we just thought that okay, Daniel, can you please share me anything that we can talk about it? And then I think the whole conversation today we are going to talk about metaverse and also this kind of parallel universe or hyper interiority, which is something very, very refreshing and something new for me. So more to unfold between us in this conversation. And also, I think you are quite multidisciplinary in your works, not just about not just about your research and also practice as well. Um, I would like to invite you with the first question that how would you like to introduce yourself? I mean, do you think you are an interior architect, you are a lecturer, or you are a researcher? And there are many hats that you are actually, you wear in different occasions.
yeah. Okay, I think the way I would like to describe myself is a spatial designer. Yeah, because actually when I graduated from London in 2014, I did my master's there. Um, the program was interior and spatial design, and we were attached with the program was a new program. It was a new program in Chelsea School of Art.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, under Chelsea School of Art. The same college where Anish Kapoor, the
Anish
artist.
Kapoor.
Yeah,
Mm,
he
mm.
graduated from there. But it's a fine art school actually. But they introduced the master's program for interior and spatial design there, and I went there as an international student with their scholarship. The program actually offered a scholarship um, for exceptional students, and it brought me there, and it was a game changer for me because the understanding of what I had here before I left for London was that
Mm, mm.
architectural design was very technical, and it was always like that because in Malaysia, as you know, um, especially in the public universities, we are taught to be very technical. I think in private universities they might have like a bit of a art side to it, but in public universities very critical,
Right.
a very critical to technical side. So
Mm.
when I arrived there, it really opened my eyes because we were in art school. I was hanging out with painters, with sculptors, with people who were, making metal works, woodworks, so playing around with clay, So this kind of exposure was, paint everywhere, even, performance art and etc. etc. And fortunately enough for me, the first the first semester before I started the program, I was also attached with the Architectural Association School for preparing us for writing. So we had to learn our writing there. So we had classes there before I moved to the Chelsea. Before I moved to Chelsea, yeah.
Right. So the whole program is a 2-year program.
Yeah, it was two plus years. So because I was in AA for I think half of a semester.
Okay.
Yeah. So after that, it was full student mode in Chelsea, no? So I would describe myself as a spatial designer because that was the most recent, I think, academic attachment I had, and that is the ideology that propels me through my practice and through my work today.
Right. So that's part 2 in a way.
Yeah.
So you did your part 1 in Malaysia, but
Yeah.
was it interior architecture as well?
Yeah, I'm purely interior architecture educated.
Right.
It actually for diploma I had interior design, and then for degree it's called interior architecture because the syllabus is a bit different, you see. So unfortunately enough, the teachers who were my professors in during my degree course, they were like the second generation of tutors who were teaching the interior architecture course in Malaysia, because the place where I studied, it was the pioneer of interior architecture education in Malaysia actually,
Which is
which is UITM.
right.
Yeah, because they started with the art and design faculty, and then actually at the end of early 60s, to
80s.
end of the 70s, I think, and then they started to separate to architecture
Right.
from the art and design. So most of the tutors were actually background were like industrial designers, artists. Yeah, but those were the first generation, and then the second generation who were under them taught me. So
Right.
so the second generation actually they were educated overseas. Most of them went to Pratt Institute. Most of them went to the
The
US.
US, right.
Yeah, the US and also UK. Um, and when they came back, they brought a whole different perspective to the understanding of space. And
Yes.
so that was like the birth of interior architecture education in Malaysia.
In
During
Malaysia.
that time, there was not even an interior designer in
Yeah,
Malaysia.
because
Yeah,
I think
so
it's quite refreshing because interior architecture is actually like a Venn diagram. It's a middle part between the interior,
yeah,
which
it's a
was
gray
not
area.
so well established back in Malaysia. And like you said, it's in the 60s or 70s or 80s, interior design is not really a major thing, but architecture,
Yeah,
yes. But
yeah.
now the Venn diagram seems to be much more broader and obvious.
Yeah, because the way I put it, to understand this phenomena is we are living in the age of refinement. You see, we are not reinventing the wheel anymore. This is what I think, and by refining architecture, you are kind of
More
kind of
specialized also.
specialization of different fields. So actually it's not about we are branching out, but it's more of like we are
Going deeper understanding.
we are dividing the different parts of the architecture. We are
Yeah,
dividing it and we are specializing in it.
right.
So because as you know, buildings are getting more complex, and even I think big companies like Foster, like Zaha, like big, some of these companies don't even carry on their projects to completion. They just design and they pass over to another firm to continue the work.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's the era of refinement to me.
And also I think it's a very collaborative and collective era where nowadays we can have specialized or facade designer, for example,
Yeah,
because back then
yeah,
it's all done by one company,
yeah,
or there will be lighting designer.
yeah.
They are different, they can become from different company as well. So it's a very, I would say, diverse nowadays. And also
Mhm.
I think it's very efficient because facade designer knows better than us about the glazing system and all.
Absolutely, yeah. So everybody has their own, specialty, and
Yeah.
I think this is important lah, because if I don't think we are having the enough attention and enough, energy to even carry out a project A to Z.
Yeah.
This is honest opinion.
Yeah.
And then another fact about interior architecture, actually, the students who graduated from there, the first, second, third batch of designers, they became the interior architects for Putrajaya. So
Mm, mm.
most of the buildings there, um, they didn't only have resident architects or project architects, they even had resident interior architects for
So
certain
there's another
projects.
subdivision for interior architecture.
Subdivision, yeah. So it created a kind of specialization, and it was really unique to Malaysia at that time.
Mm, mm.
It was really interesting. So, and most of the graduates who were interested in academia, for example, they started to become educators in other universities and
Yeah.
and colleges in Malaysia, and that was like the epicenter of the interior architecture and interior design education.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting you brought up the project Putrajaya at the point of time is a new project, it's a
Yeah,
new city or
yeah,
new idea of percepting a new city and new township, for example.
yeah,
But also, like you mentioned, that's very interesting that it's also way of working. How do we work? Is also
yes,
another especially in the professional field, you can see there are different ways of working and also what we work. This is very interesting. I just thought to bring back the idea where you mentioned you studied in both Malaysia and UK, and how does that happen? How did that happen in Turkey? Like is it because of the design biennale?
okay. So how did I migrate to Turkey? So that one is kind of attached with my personal life.
Okay.
Yeah, I actually I my wife is Turkish, and
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, so we were studying together in London, and then she had how can I say?
Like a
She was
program.
no, she was also a scholarship student, so she had
Right.
attachment after she graduated. So she needed to teach in Turkey lah, basically. So we went there. Actually, I continued my architecture design bureau, which is my professional practice,
Yeah.
remotely from Turkey, because I didn't directly start my work as a academician, because prior to that, prior to London, I was always practicing. I didn't teach before that.
Mm,
Yeah, so it was my first go-to occupation, and then I started to get projects, and it was going great. But I developed a certain interest in education and in teaching and learning, because
mm.
until a certain point you start to feel like you need some kind of nourishment for your knowledge, and especially in our field, in interior architecture or interior design, because I mean, the knowledge is kind of
Constant as well.
constant, and it's like a generic knowledge throughout architecture. So there is not like a deeper understanding about space. And after the master's program, we were talking a lot about space. So the attention shifted, like, oh, there is more to this than architecture actually.
Mm, mm, mm.
Back again to what I said before, like from the technical, we started to explore the narrative we started to explore the philosophy, we started to explore the concepts, and the view of how you can view space with different perspectives, like from a arts perspective, you can look at it from a psychological perspective, etc.
This reminds me of Four Walls and a Roof by Rainer de Graaf. He was talking about architecture has been constantly chasing after something, for example, technology. One day they will be come out with a new technology and then architecture will chase after it and on, rather than architecture will lead the way to evolve or invent something new. I'm not saying it doesn't, but it's just that quite rare because in the end, it's quite a hemisphere of interfere by politics, by culture, by by consumerism, by how people look at beauty, how people use materials, money, and all. So it's actually like architecture become like a byproduct in a way. That's how I see. But of course, it's like it's a vice versa thing. So architecture influence life architecture, is a cycle. Sorry.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, because sorry, like life, how it grows in this sense. I'm quite curious to know about your childhood in specific understanding patterns because in speaking of language of patterns, I've noticed that very much in your works. Would you like to tell us about your childhood and also how does that relate to how do you understand patterns? How do you understand certain concept that relates to who you are now?
Okay, so I think I grew up in different places, and different countries as well. So you never really grew. I never really grew up with a set of friends which I knew until like 7 8 years. It was like always changing. So in order for me to kind of make sense of the society that I was coming into, you really need to read people quickly, and the way you can read people quickly is by looking at the behavior and the pattern lah. So you start to see, people in certain schools, they behave in a certain way, so this is the way you need to be, or this is the way that is deemed normal in this area. So this is how I started to be observant of patterns. But from there, my family was always having a academic background. They were educators, in different fields. But we always talked a lot. And when ever since I was growing up and in school, we would always contemplate on the things that we saw, because every time we move places, then this is something new. You need to understand this is new. Look at how it's made. Look at how it looks. Look at how it is appreciated by other people. And I was actually interested to be like an industrial designer, actually, before I was interested in architecture, because I remember I was really good at making toys, actually.
Like assembly and all.
Yeah, so every time I get a new toy, the first thing I would do after I unpack it,
you open up everything.
I dismantle the toy.
Oh.
And I start to look at how it works, and which parts goes together, and things like this. And it intrigued my sense of putting things together, and making stuff work.
Wow, that's
In a
interesting,
way.
right?
So the product design kind of interest came from the toys. But after a certain point, it was getting to the age where I grew out of playing with toys, at a certain age. And then I looked at the architecture lah. Basically, it was kind of like something unusual for me, because the house is, you feel the house or domestic space or things like this is quite normal to you. You don't really pay attention to these spaces. But once you travel, especially airports,
Oh
the
my God.
airports yeah, the
I was
airports
very
and
much interested in airports as well.
yeah, the airports, the train stations, you know, like the ferry docks, you know, like this kind of
Infrastructure, transport base.
infrastructure. Yeah, because the, you know, in terms of how they are built is something different, and that really intrigued me. And then it took me to kind of going deeper to the kind of like how I feel about spaces, you know.
Right. So
Yeah, so
now, in a
yeah,
way, the stations are like a bigger toy for you to see, look at details and how they explode into details and also
yeah, because
components, yeah,
yeah, because infrastructure design is more or less see through, you know.
functional,
Yeah, you
yeah.
can see what's going on, like the parts are there. So I'm not just wondering, like I don't need to wonder like what's inside, like how they put it together, you know. You can see everything that's going on there.
Mm.
uh,
Do-
so
Yeah, quick question. Do you mind to
yeah.
tell us what was the toy that you can imagine at this moment? Is it a car, racing car, or a gear or something? Or
Oh,
camera? I'm
okay.
not sure.
I think it was a robot, like
Ah,
a figure of a robot, but I don't remember specifically what robot, but it was a toy robot. Yeah.
the
So it
one like a
yeah.
standing red color
Yeah,
something.
something like something similar to that. And after that, you know, few cars models came into play, and then I had like jet models. Yeah,
Mm, mm.
so it was that kind of things that triggered, you know, I think which triggered the designer aspect of me now, and
That's,
the
yeah,
interest part. Yeah,
interesting. Because I think there are actually some connection to the works that we will discuss later on. There
I
is
see.
this about components, about fabrication,
Yeah,
assembly, and also this kind of like a cell generation, like a
yeah,
it's a, quite a biological yet technical and machine-based kind of thing.
yeah.
So moving forward, I think we can briefly talk about capitecture as well, and also your personal philosophy, and also most importantly, like you mentioned, along the way you met different kind of people, not just about your tutor but also peers. Um, I mean, I'm very briefly we're gonna like talk about how you met Sam and also motion fixture, because that's somehow not just about working with them, but also there are works that afterward there's a language that you all speak at the same wave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the collaboration experience is quite interesting. Would you like to briefly tell us about how you work, and also like there are certain provocative thinking and also new media that you experiment with?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the I will start with no to scale. All right. So with I knew Sam first before Adra. Actually, the thing that got me to know Sam was because he was in the architecture studio. I was in interior architecture, but our studios are on the same floor.
Mm,
And you know, being architecture students, we used to kind of live in the studio, you know, like
yeah,
we
yeah.
never really went home, like we stay in the studio, even though it's not you know, it's not prohibited, you know, because but because you would have certain times of the
Mm,
day you
mm,
need to go
mm,
back, but we basically live in the studio. And then
mm.
we just worked, you know, like me and other peers, and also Sam, he was always in the studio as well.
Mm,
Like we
mm,
were always in the studio. So after our classes, and after we had finished, you know, some work, we would just hang out near the studios, and we would just talk, you know,
mm,
just
mm,
talk.
mm,
And then the things that we talk about is not like I mean, some other people, they might talk about their interests, like, you know, what they're interested in, but we always talk about, most of the time we talk about design.
mm, mm.
Yeah. And you know, like how we want to push
The
and be
boundary
different.
of it, yeah.
Yeah, and be different, because I think we all had a different style in our batch, you know, like I clearly remember some of the pin-up sessions where I would go and see his work and some other classmates of his. But you know, his kind of style is a bit different than compared to others, and this would be kind of a similar thing which happens in our studio lah. You would see a difference in between my work and the other students' works. Yeah. So I mean, that's the background of how we met, and I mean the process of thinking, maybe it developed individually, but from time to time we would come back together and always have these conversations, because we wouldn't just stop in like one conversation. This conversation about architecture, about design, about, you know, our standpoint, our points of interest continues even until today. We have regular conversations over the phone because of, you know, we can't really meet each other so much. But it happens. And then only after that I was introduced to Adra a bit later. But in terms of working, the first ever collaboration we had was the fourth Istanbul Design Biennale. Yeah, that was in Turkey in 2015 or 16, I can't remember. It was for a project called
Design as Currency.
Design as Currency, yeah. So we were talking about the idea of how design can be valued and, you know, can be understood to be having the power of actually becoming currency. And then after that, the NFT blew off, you know. So in a way, like we were like I don't know about Sam, but actually I was you know, a bit shocked, like, okay, this idea actually caught up into something, you know, like because NFT is not only just like Bitcoin or something like that. I mean, it's a cryptocurrency, but you are turning that cryptocurrency into like a object, like something which is can kind of be valued as an artwork,
right,
or is an artwork. So you are actually exchanging design as currency. You know, so you're keeping it in that form. So it was really interesting. But our project was about actually intercontinental appreciation of design as and what value it holds. So we were exchanging objects in terms of its visuals, in terms of its measurements and things like this, in between people from Turkey and Malaysia. And you know, we exchanged objects. For Malaysian objects, we were exchanging objects which were on the back of our ringgit shillings. You know, if you realize on the back of the shillings,
they are Parliament Negara. They are,
yeah, there are objects on the shillings itself. So it was really interesting, and we took those objects. You know, like we had the chongka, we had the gasing, we had the
wow, maybe
the wow, yeah, we had the wow, and so we were exchanging these objects because these objects were also cultural objects. So it was really interesting, you know. So in a way, those objects were included as like a design for the ringgit coins, but we actually took it out from there and kind of asked people, how do you value this, you know? So yeah, so the feedback was interesting, you know. It was I really found it interesting. And then we later were invited to give a talk on that during the Biennale. Yeah.
And also, I think what you have mentioned is more rather a static 2D artwork. But then there comes to a point where you start to be more more active in graphic or illustration with the collaboration with like Mosho Pixio. So
Yeah.
that's another beyond of the design where the medium and also the there's no limit in this sense where you can go
Yeah.
beyond that. I mean, speaking of motions, where we can talk more about where we can see instant mihrab. So that's
Yeah.
where more things happening there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, since we're talking about design as currency, I would love to know about your personal perspective on design. Um, it seems to be design as currency and also medium exchange bank that two they are actually one project, isn't it? They are
Yeah, it's
kind of
actually the main project was design as currency, but actually the medium exchange bank was like a follow up to that main idea. And we were talking with Sam about during that time. I think we were always talking about scanning and printing, like 3D scanning and printing, and we were intrigued by that idea. And also Adra from No to Scale was having a project where she was looking into the notion of all the the problem
technological sides, I think.
no the problem of landmarks or artifacts being stolen, like so in a way that kind of brought about that medium exchange bank. And it was something radical, something fun. And this kind of things is interesting for us to talk about lah.
Yeah.
Because you value the design of those things. Like, why don't you just build another one? For example, if the twin towers were somehow to vanish, like, is it going to be the same if you rebuild it, or is
Mm,
the original one going to be the original one, like it's the only
right,
one?
right.
Yeah, so the idea of that is then translated into the medium exchange bank. So instead of giving back the original, you can actually replicate the original in a one-to-one scale,
Hmm.
and using it as a bargaining chip for political, or even
Mm.
for as bargaining chips. So it's something interesting to talk about, which
Yeah.
like the design has, I don't know if before design has been thought about in this way, but for us it was something interesting and something new.
It sounds like like for example, like panda, it's like a diplomatic symbol, like,
Yeah,
you
like a
know,
diplomatic symbol. Yeah.
yes. So, I mean, how about personally, do you think designer, because I think part of the reason why I would like to ask this, because you also as an educator,
Yeah.
where in the assignment we tend to, create something new or something symbolic, iconic. If we proposal come out with a TNB station, it's something very common, then designer tend to think this is not design, this is something ordinary. But from your point of view, there seems to be like one is creating new things, but yet about iconic. But yet this inspiration is actually questioning what we have, at the existing moment. For example, we like to ask how can we do this, or what if, or why not, this kind of question.
Yeah,
So
so like,
yeah, as a role of designer, then how do you see the attitude? How do we see things? And also, it's not always new things is new things. I hope you get that. Get
I
that.
yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah, exactly. Because I think the key here is speculative thinking. So I don't think anything is new. As I mentioned before, I think we live in a world of refinement, like not in
Mm,
a world of reinventing the wheel.
mm,
So of course people are talking about innovation and creating new things and stuff, but I think it's all about refining. And the way you can refine and actually understand what is going to happen, or how you can predict things, how it will happen, is through speculation. you
mm.
know um, so that's how I look at design. Like, you have to have like uh, a speculation of how it can be, what it can be. You always are asking questions, rather than just applying to the brief or conforming to the brief. Like what we did with Mosho Fixo was that, because they were going to the direction of where graphic design was going into projection mapping. Yeah, they did a lot of projection mapping on exterior of buildings, and they did, Faris from Motion Fixo did that, and it was and a few other of his partners, but I knew Faris because we engaged for the Yuna stage project. Yeah, so that was how I engaged with him, because for that project, he was interested in the aspect of how the graphic will look on the stage, like as the backdrop of the stage. So in my from my perspective, what was important was how I can capture that graphics, like how can I capture that in space. Because if he does projection mapping, it's on like a static surface, and you can't really make the architectural aspect move with the motion. I mean, the motion is moving, the graphic is moving, but however, the architectural aspect is static. Like, yeah. And I was wondering, like, how can I bring that to another dimension? How can I move it? If not physically, how can I move it in terms of its dimension
emotionally,
or
right?
emotion? Yeah. So the thing that we came out with was dimension. So instead of just capturing the image on a 2D surface, we actually created a 3D screen. So the screen was made from nylon fishing wires. Yeah, it was nearly 500 kilograms worth of line.
Wow, right.
Yeah, one by one, and we made a screen, but the screen is not like just one flat surface. It had a depth. It had a depth of 60 centimeters. So how it captures the screen is actually, sorry, how it captures the graphics is actually, it gives the 2D graphic, it gives it depth, you see, because the wire is translucent. So it doesn't really absorb the light in the first catch. It disperses the light. So in a way, it enhances the graphics. And it was, we made a prototype, like a small scale prototype, and that really caught the attention of the artist as well, Yuna. And for Faris and his team at Mosho Fixo, it was a moment where we say, let's experiment with this. Let's do it big. Let's make it big. Yeah.
Interesting.
So
Yeah.
yeah, because it's translucent, actually you can't see the screen when it's dark. You see, the when the stage is not lit up, you can't see it at all. It's just black. But when you see the graphic being thrown to the background, it catches it, and suddenly you have like an invisible screen.
Now, in speaking of that, because I just think that you mentioned a few keywords, for example, refinement,
Yeah.
and also earlier like specialization, enhancement, and also experiment, and
Yeah.
also speculation. So all these terms are actually leads to the point where to deepen our understanding on a certain existing infrastructure or fundamentals. And which I think this gonna leads to the term that you mentioned to me over the conversation. You talk about hyper interiority. So the word hyper, it means intensive understanding. And you mentioned about this kind of like a metaverse, where I do believe that metaverse means there's a basic, like there's a realm, there's an understanding of a, let's say, planet A, you come out A1, A2, A3 kind of thing. And also you mentioned about like rural shelter, room, open plan, and multifunctional space. Would you like to talk about this?
Okay.
This quite a big concept.
Okay. So hyper interiority is actually a theory I'm trying to put forward. This is actually a way of trying to understand our culture, our culture of in between human and space. Be it physical space or be it digital or virtual space. So this theory is actually to see how in reality, we are actually going deeper and deeper inside.
mm.
So we are moving in a regression rather than a progression, you know, in terms of psychologically. Yeah, we are moving more in and inwards kind of direction. So instead of expanding, we kind of turn to the other way. We are
Right.
folding inside. So the main idea was like, you know, to see like the whole concept of interior is actually, if we look at it in parts, interior is meaning enclosed architecture space. You know, this is what interior means for architectural designers. Interiority, on the other hand, is the notion of subjectivity.
Mm.
So it means your relation with your environment. So what is your perception of what makes you comfortable? So it's subjective to you. So there is like a personal space around you. So interiority is your perspective towards your environment and how you react to it. But interior space is the enclosed space. It's physical. Okay. So hyper interiority is trying to unravel the connections in between interior and interiority. So in a way, because we live, if you look at the survey
Mm.
in a study made in America, they say we live more than 80% of our life in interior
Mm.
spaces.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. So this living in the interior space for a certain amount of time during the day, it not only gives effect to you psychologically but also physically. You know, like it affects your physical health, it affects your mental health, it affects your the way you perceive relationship with people, how you behave in a space. And since modernist architecture started after the 50s, after Le Corbusier, after the, you know, the Congress of Modern Architecture in
Mm.
Netherlands, you know,
Mm.
I don't, I think you've heard of Team 10 or Team
Team
X.
10.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So, you know, after that, after the liberation of the interior from load-bearing walls,
Mm.
okay, so the interior suddenly became an open plan.
Mm.
Okay, and then from there it opened the possibilities of multi-functioning
Mm.
space.
Mm. So it's an open, like Mia's pavilion is all open. There's no
Yeah.
saying like you should sit here. You can be open anywhere.
Yeah, so there is that sense of dictation of how you should be in specific areas of the house has changed to a free plan. Okay, so it became like a multi, it can change according to the situations very easily. Instead, before it was a separate rooms by itself and it had really thick walls, so it wasn't having that sense of freedom. Even the windows were small because load bearing walls, you cannot open big
Openings or
windows. Yeah.
yeah.
So it was really bad for their health and etc. etc. So with the open plan, the multi-use space came about. Okay, with the modern architecture, and what this does was it made people live more and more indoors because suddenly there is a sense of freedom and you can be more engaging with the interior, because previously before it was more like um, behaving like a shelter, you see. Yeah, you are trying to get away from the environment, or you're trying to get away
Mm. Mm.
from certain elements, so you are in the interior. But suddenly it became a space of entertaining people, suddenly it
Mm.
became a space of exhibition, suddenly it became a space of you can have people come and stay over, you know, you have that flexibility in
Flexibility,
the
yeah.
space. Yeah. So how it affected us, like in the 20th century, is like multi-use space. You know, you have home office, you have especially
Convention
during
center as well.
yeah, especially during the pandemic. So when we look at the domestic scale, right, the domestic space, the living room becomes the dining room, becomes
Yes.
the kitchen,
Yes.
becomes the, it becomes the spare bedroom if you have guests, it becomes
Yes.
the home office.
Yes.
So in my opinion, this forces you to be uncomfortable with your interior, especially if you have a domestic space which is smaller than 1,000 square feet. Okay, so it pushes you to become uncomfortable, and what do you want after that? You want to go outside.
Mm, mm.
So instead of that liberating moment of being in the interior, and you want to be more in the interior, all of a sudden you want to escape the interior
Because it's not clearly defined, because it's so
because it's not
flexible,
clearly defined. It's so flexible. It becomes
ambiguous as well.
yeah, it's disruptive. At the end of the day, it's disruptive. There is only a certain limit where you can actually incorporate too many functions into a space, you see.
Right.
So this phenomena pushes you to try to escape to somewhere else. And
Mm,
it's either you escape to the urban, or you escape to the virtual, or you
mm,
escape to another space.
mm,
But again, it's another interior space, because when you go out, the urban streets are becoming more and more incorporated in between spaces. When you
mm,
exit from a tube station, you want to go to another space, like a shopping mall or something. You're going through a tunnel. You're not walking on the street.
mm, mm,
You are
mm.
in a continuous interior space. So Susie Atterwill from RMIT,
Mm,
she was talking about the urban interiority. Like how the urban spaces are becoming bigger interior spaces rather than exterior spaces, and becoming open spaces. So more and more over time, the interior space's size is increasing. If you look at shopping malls, the size of the interior is huge, man. Like the way we understand interior before was domestic space. That was
mm, mm,
interior
mm,
space,
mm, mm.
or like a shop, or like somewhere you would go inside and engage just for a few minutes, and you would be out in the street again. But when you see what's happening in our cities now, more and more interior spaces are about, and this extension of the interior is moving from domestic to public space to infrastructure
Mm.
to consumerism spaces. So you are almost nearly almost most of the time are in interior spaces. And once you want to escape that, where do you go? You go to your social media, you go to
Mm,
internet, you go to another interior. You're going more and more
another
inside,
dimension as well.
another dimension. So you are dealing with now you are dealing, instead of dealing with the interior, you're dealing with interiority, because you are dealing with a space where you feel, oh, this is actually my private space. But you are in a metaverse. You are in a virtual realm. You are meeting with people. You are not yourself. You are an avatar. Okay, you are avatar. Sometimes you can have your face and whatnot, but you know you are actually represented as someone which you think is you feeling comfortable in that avatar, or in that character, in that space. So escaping the physical, and you are entering another space, which is a virtual space, which has no scale. You are actually tied in that kind of interior and
Mm.
interiority.
Yeah.
So what I want to say is, actually, we are more and more describing architecture. People, especially designers, when we talk about architecture, we talk about describing architecture through scale. Like if I say to you, imagine what is a public space,
Mm,
and you would say something to me like, most probably it would look something like Trafalgar Square, in
mm,
your mind. Okay,
mm, mm.
so something big, something open. So if I say, tell me, imagine and describe to me a domestic space, you would describe a living room, or you would describe a bedroom. So the scale changes, but actually the concept of hyper interiority, it's not explaining architecture through scale. It's actually explaining architecture through time and its space of existence.
Okay, so in that case, then I somehow reminded me there was a statement by Kengo Kumar when he was designing V&A Dundee.
Yeah.
And he said the museum is actually a living room of Dundee. So in that sense, sounds like Dundee is a big house and then V&A is a living room.
Yeah.
So now, yeah, I mean, maybe you put in a context where terrace house in Malaysia or Taman, for example. So let's say the whole Taman is like a house. There's a driveway become like a corridor. And then the house become like a room, and then the living room inside that room become like a room kind of thing.
Exactly.
So like you
it
said,
shifts.
where do we, I think nowadays you are quite right in a way, because when let's say I wanted to go Trafalgar Square, I need to go through my walkway, which I can think is an interior. And then I go down the tube station, is an interior, and come down from the station, Trafalgar Square can be an interior. So in that sense, that how do you see we can get out from that interiorized or territorial space where what is actually exterior nowadays? Because it seems to be, because there was one day I was in the bus and then I saw a gate, and the gate will have a door. So how do we know that when we go through the door we are actually inside a space? We can say we are out, we are inside. Yeah. When I go out the street and then I say I'm inside the street. When I come out, why do we know that when we come open the door and then we say we are inside a house?
Yeah. So do you understand? So you are shifting in between interior spaces, but these interior spaces are connected with your sense of interiority. So you're making sense of those spaces with what you feel comfortable. So when you are in the street, you are engaging with the street in a street level understanding. So for example, when I'm walking on the street, my space where I feel comfortable is the pedestrian. So that becomes like engagement with a part of the architectural environment where it kind of you kind of read it as a space. You kind of read it. You don't read it like an exterior. You read it like another space, because you're kind of attaching yourself to the elements of that pavement, you know, and you're relating it because it's comfortable to walk on it. It's, you know, it has the dimensions are good to have multi pedestrian traffic, you know. So in a way it becomes a space by itself on the street, but it's on the street. You understand? So the only way you can escape that, what people think is you know, escaping the city, because when you escape the city and then somehow you are in a element where you are in an element where the human kind of feels alien, I can say, because if you think, no, because when you think about it, the epistemology of architecture buildings were for the human to feel comfortable in the environment. You know, you are trying to make sense of it, trying to feel comfortable, and the human was acting like an alien to the environment. You understand?
Does it mean that because we are not defined by elements of architecture, for example, like wall, roof, stairs, window, door, this kind of thing?
Yeah, and in as you know, when we design spaces, we conform to certain measurements, and these measurements have standards. And you know, since Le Corbusier, when he introduced the 5 points, and he was talking about the machine, as a building as machines, and machines for humans.
A house is a machine for living in, right?
Yeah. So you know, he wanted to, you know, the idea was to standardize everything for the human and make it perfect. But in a way, this standardization of measurement didn't really make people prosper. You know, it limited people into a certain way of a certain pattern of engaging with the architecture environment, and this doesn't necessarily work with people from different cultures. But you know, we somehow humans adapted to that. And when in his time it was engaging with the industrial side, because it was post-war.
Exactly.
But you know, like now we are engaged more with technology, and we are making sense of technology through our spaces, and we're trying to incorporate more and more technology in our spaces. And suddenly we are taught, you know, okay, with technology for example, with virtual reality, you are in a space and suddenly basic human functions are like you are unlocking like a new skill in the virtual environment, but actually you are experiencing the virtual environment in a limited window, like you can't really behave like a human in those environments, but somehow you need additional technology or additional gadgets to make you behave more and more like a human in a non-human environment. So it's a never ending vacuum, in a way.
Because
Yeah,
there's no end, then there's no start as well.
yeah.
We
So
are like in the between.
yeah, so this was what Beatrice was writing about in and also Mark about are we human, like are we really human? Like the technology is kind of teaching us how we should behave as humans.
Yes.
We don't really read architecture or experience architecture with our human senses anymore. So that takes me to the part of how I try to engage with the kind of biological part of human and
Yeah.
biological part of architecture.
That's interesting because there was one time I had a debate with a friend, and then he was talking about technology and human. But in my point of view, technology is human because we invent things and we
Yeah,
come out with technology. And in fact, sometimes technology can be more human than human. I mean, in certain ways, which later on we can talk more about it because I think
yeah,
Are
sure.
We Human? That book is really
Yeah,
notable works for me, I think, because
I
that
see.
leads me to understand biological, like you said, and also how human civilization in a quite a scientific way, like origin of species as well. Um, I think one last question before we go through the whole technology and also your works. I would like to talk about, because when we talk about multiverse or this kind of a dimension and universe, we were talking about in the design sense, like philosophy and spatial experience. There are different layers of understanding interior, but what about when it comes to practice? There is a basis, let's say, called design. And then when you explore the layers, they are interior, they are industrial, they are product, they are landscape, they are urban design, they are digital art, for example. So will this somehow form your mindset where you wanted to be multidisciplinary and more open to understand, architecture is not one thing, there are so many layers of it to understand that?
Yeah, actually, the how I try to make sense of that is what is actually design and what is actually architecture. Because ultimately it's the relationship with the human. That's that's like the ultimate relationship. Like how it relates to you. So be it a building, be it an object which you design, be it like a urban setting, be it whatever, like because it interacts with the human, it ultimately you are designing for the human. So
Yep.
yeah, so it transcends the discipline in that sense.
Mm,
And when I'm practicing as a interior architect or as a spatial designer, I try to think of how the space is kind of engaged, rather than how the space would be benefiting in terms of
mm,
its
mm,
performance in its sales or performance in its whatever.
mm.
My ultimate aim when I design something is how would people experience it, how would people engage with it,
Mm,
because at the end of the day I want to focus on that aspect of design.
mm.
Yeah,
And it's very interesting because now I'm looking back at the cover of Are We Human? It says, Are We Human? Notes on an archaeology of design. So it's
yeah.
about design in a way.
Mhm.
If we see human body as a design, it could be quite interesting as well because it's like our hand is like an arm, like a crane that you move things. Our brain is like a main computer, and then our eyes and we do things.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, yet to discover, there are so many religious or whether scientific um, belief in like human design and human machine mechanism in a way.
Yeah,
It's like we are actually
yeah,
kind of a machine. Like I would,
yeah,
that's what I thought. Yeah.
yeah. So to kind of add on what you said, I think the human is designed. You
Mm,
know,
mm,
like there is a designer for the human, because it's not, I mean, the science is trying to make sense of the world through, you know, through observation, through understanding, through testing. And you know, to me personally, I don't think the human mutated from something.
mm, mm.
I mean, we adapted to the environment, that's no doubt. I mean, I don't have any issue with that, but the human came about by evolution from like a creature from the water. That doesn't make sense to me. Even though you say it takes a million, how many million years, you know, of evolution to come to this stage of being a human. So if that's the case, random mutation, right? If that's the case, you would see someone maybe with four arms. You would see someone maybe with, you know, ears that look like fins or something, because it's random, right? Like it's not like something which is perfect. But if you look at a human, every part of the human body is working in perfectly.
And
You
they are
know,
function for it.
they are functioning perfectly. The human body is a amazing machine. You know, like it can repair itself, it can grow, it can do amazing things. So I don't think the human body is something by coincidence. It's designed.
Yes, yes.
Yeah,
And I
just look at
think,
the, yeah, I
yeah.
mean, just look at the simple function of eating. You know, like when you take a piece of food, why is your nose near to your mouth? So that you can
Mm,
enjoy the food with the smell of the food at the same time.
mm,
You
mm.
can taste it with the smell and with the tongue, and with, you know, you have a set of teeth. It's amazing. I mean, if you look deeper into it, the list goes on and on, like how great the
Yes.
the body is designed, you know.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
also we not to mention there are lots of things function based on our human body, like a spoon, why spoon design in such a way, a
yeah,
kettle and things like this is all
yeah,
followed by us.
yeah, yeah. Again, the measurement, the standardization of measurement was according to the human, even though we were turning it into an industrialized you know, aspect, but it's still the yardstick of every measurement was for architecture was the human, you know.
And I think it will be quite interesting, let's say we are living in the age where almost everyone has a mobile phone. Maybe after 100 years later, our thumbnail might be longer because we swipe from too much. And then it's also, because like I said, I mean, I do agree because it's an environment, like why people tend to be, I mean, the skin color is actually relatable to climate
Yeah,
or our body feature. They are like a genetics, and
yeah,
also how does it respond to the environment, and vice versa. We actually change. That's why I was quite interested about the idea of air conditioning.
I
Is
see.
a air conditioning, is it condition a certain environment, like, oh, we feel hot, then we want to install an AC, and then we feel comfortable to down to, let's say, 20 degrees, for example.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's a conditioning theory, which I think lots of chapter with to
yeah.
answer.
Another chapter, I think, because yeah,
Yeah.
it opens other topics as
Mm.
well, you know, because the human, as you say, certain degrees of temperature can change and affect, and the human can feel either comfortable or uncomfortable, you
Mm,
know, like
mm,
it's
mm.
just a simple, just some slight details of even temperature can affect your body in a certain way. And you know, when the body is affected, then your psychology is affected.
Mm,
And
mm.
you know, again, the process of making sense of the interior with the understanding of interiority.
Right. I think that's, I mean, it's a very, very excited topic now. I think maybe we can move on to, because we were talking about are we human as well. And
Yeah,
then I just thought that we can actually, I think there are certain points that we share quite mutually. And you talk about generative design, like a biological research design, which I thought is like a trial and error as well. I think I believe it's an evolution. It's like a natural selection, cycle, repetition, mutation, maybe in some part of mutation, coexistence and reproduction. And I think that it's more of the theory where, you know, 1 become 2, 2 become 4, 4 become 16. It's like a mutation of doubling, or, you know, like not square root, but it's more like a dimension mutation. But you also mentioned quite highly of Gordon Matta-Clark, which I think that's what an interesting part, because we always talk about multiple, but for Gordon, his work is reduce, you know, to cut down to back, you know, rather than we go more, we go less to understand better. How would you like to talk about his works and how does that influence in your thinking?
Okay, so um, when I was, as I mentioned, I was interested in dismantling, and that kind of when I found out about Matta-Clark, I think it was I saw his artwork. It was a picture of the the conical. Was it called the conical?
Which is the project that he cut like a circle and all.
Like yeah, it's actually a cone shape, you know, that circle. It's a cone shape. Yeah, it was called the conical intersect, if I'm not mistaken. So what happened was he was trying to show people, you know, you see that neighborhood was going to be
Demolished.
demolished and rebuilt. So behind that was the Pompidou Center. It was under construction. So what he did was he opened the window through the building so that people can actually see what's happening behind. So in a way, you are looking through the art to see what is actually coming. And he talks a lot about an architecture. And you know, I think that's a separate topic for us to talk about, because if we go into that. But you know, how it influenced me is that the process of the dismantling was absolutely something that I enjoyed. I mean, the intellectual journey I had from reading his works were really inspiring. The conical, and then I saw the split house, you know, the split house. So that kind of made sense to me, because I never really thought of taking apart architecture, you know. So it was always like building architecture, not taking apart. So during my masters, the first part of the course was actually to kind of figure out where your research interest is going, you see. So I was trying to kind of go in deeper into trying to dismantle architecture, but dismantling it in the sense of trying to reveal the inside to the outside, you know, like trying to crack it open, because the interior is, as I say, it's like something which is confined. So and then I saw the Tower of David, you know, and that was a really, you know, when the book came out, it was fantastic, you know. You saw images of how people tapped into like an open building, you know, and started to build their own spaces in that building. So in a way, when you allow people to kind of engage with the interior from an exterior point of view, from the street level, from the perspective of the exterior, it kind of brings about a different possibility to that architecture. And it brought me to the project called Spawn City. You know, I had that project. So if you saw some of my my collages, they were not concrete designs. It's not concrete designs per se. I mean, it doesn't have a scheme, or it doesn't have something like that, but it's actually a reassembly of broken down parts of
a ship, ship.
Of a it's actually broken down pieces of a tower.
Right.
It's a tower it's about to be demolished, but in Germany, but I wanted to repurpose the building because it's actually already a built structure. If we can somehow repurpose the parts of the building to be a different kind of structure where people can actually attach or engage into, then that's the whole concept of the sponsity, like a place where people can just tap into architecture and just make sense and make the space their own. So that's how Gordon matta-clark influenced my thinking for this project. Yeah.
I think like you said way earlier, it's about like thinking backward to move forward kind of idea,
Yeah.
where rather
Yeah.
than we build more. I think you mentioned Pompidou Center at the point of time it's under construction. It must be quite a contrast or conflict where people trying to build something new, but in fact I don't need to build something new, but rather I reduce something then create something new as well. That's the flip side. I think that's quite interesting. And I think that leads to the point where, because since you talked about Pompidou Center, that at that point of time is quite a cutting edge technological, very tectonic, very it's a high tech architecture in a way.
Yeah.
And then I would like to talk about works in the sense that it's we were talking about human as well. It's like human as technology, technology as human. And in this case, I would like to bring two projects that you did. One is instant mihrab, which I think is by using human to understand technology. And another one is overlay hagia sophia, which is using technology to understand human civilization better. Instant mihrab, I think, is because use human interaction, like a mapping, like you say, perhaps is something like tracking where like a tracking where devices where projection is actually follow your motions. That's one. And then overlaying hagia sophia is using technology like doing like an X-ray to understand better. So would you like to tell us about these two projects and what were the inspiration or the process behind?
Okay, so the project Instant Mihrab, this one was actually it was actually to kind of exhibit the connection of human and space actually through technology. That relationship of human and space. For example, the action that I'm trying to illustrate here with the installation was the action of praying actually, and how certain sacred spaces needed to be respected and understood in a specific way because it had meaning and it engages with the user in a specific way. And for certain people, they couldn't understand how that works. Like, how does a human engage with a space, and that space is connected with another space somewhere else? So we wanted to kind of show that through technology, and it really gave an impact in terms of understanding that connection through the visual, because the mihrab, if the mihrab is actually the ornamented part of a mosque interior. It actually shows the direction of the Kaaba, the direction of Mecca. So all mosques, if they have the mihrab, it's like the focal point of the mosque, you see. So you know which direction you are facing when you are praying. So in a way, I created like a installation, a digital installation, which interacts with the user. And my users, obviously, they are not using it for praying, but more to kind of exploring the engagement with the body. But this really brought understanding of how your body can actually interact with the space, and it can transcend that ornamented piece into something which is not confined architecturally. It can actually transcend the space. And Yeah, you can see.
So this was exhibited in a school or something.
Actually, this was exhibited in, yeah, in this one is, this video was particularly the one installed in the triangle space. The triangle space is actually the gallery space near to our school compound. It's in between the school and Tate Britain.
Right.
Yeah.
So as you move further, as you move closer to the work, you will like projecting through, is it?
Yeah, yeah. So it's all those dots are actually mapping on your body. So
Ah,
the depth of the ornament changes with the user. So it's unique. Every user has a different outcome in terms of how the mihrab will look visually. So the thing that I want to show here is that the different users have different connections with or relationships with the space, even though it's the same, it's the same space. 10 people can be using same space, but not everyone will respond or interact with this space in the same way. Which
yeah,
kind which
right.
kind of which kind of gives a weakness to the understanding of modernist architecture. Like uh, you cannot really dictate how people live and how people use a certain thing through standardizations of
Mm.
measurement. Everyone is different actually.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting because, like you mentioned, mihrab is like let's say in this case, it's an objectified direction
Yeah,
where people tend to follow. Okay, this is the direction that we need to pray to.
yeah,
While in this case, the object follows the human in other way around.
yeah,
So that's quite interesting where to overturn the perception of mihrab because mihrab is in a way static where human
yeah,
knows that that's the direction and then we just follow that.
yeah.
But what about when it comes to Hagia Sophia? That's
Mhm.
another different project. Or do you
Yeah.
see what's the similarity between? So this was done before overlay
This,
Hagia Sophia.
yes, this was done before. So overlay Hagia Sophia was actually trying to make sense of architecture spaces through the time and space rather than through, as I mentioned before, trying to mention with scale. Because
Mm.
I don't know if you've been there or have you
No,
seen it.
no. I wish you visit one day. Yeah.
Oh yeah, sure, you should go.
Mm.
I mean, the space is massive,
Mm.
especially the interior. I mean, when you look from a distance, when you look from the exterior, it looks like a big building, but you don't really understand the scale yet,
Mm.
because around surrounding the Hagia Sophia, there is not another big building where you can compare the size. You see,
Mm.
so when you go in and then you understand like your scale. But what we are trying to do here is um, we are trying to make sense of the interior through its time and space.
Mm.
So the the Hagia Sophia was renovated a few times during the course of its life. It was
Mm.
before, because it was a centerpiece of Byzantine Empire,
Mm.
and then after it was turned into, after it was conquered by the Ottomans, it was changed into a mosque. And
Mm.
the way the Hagia Sophia was changed was actually the Turkish people preserved the interior. I mean, the layers inside the interior were actually covered up to restore the to store the original artworks. You see, so later when they, during the Republic, uh, Turkish archaeologists actually uncovered some parts of the Hagia Sophia which still has in perfect condition the ornaments of the Christians in the
Mm.
interior.
Mm.
It
Mm.
was never damaged. It was never dismantled. It was just
Cover
covered
up.
up. Yeah,
Mm.
covered up, but in a perfect way. Like it doesn't damage at all. the original artwork. So in a way, the sensitivity, the sensitivity to conservation, the sensitivity towards not giving a forceful impact to the architecture was really something that we wanted to communicate with people, and how the uncovering of the layers, because as you see from this artwork, it's actually exploring the layers of marbles,
Right.
which were applied to the interior during different time periods and different usages of Hagia Sophia as a space. So during
right.
this during the different times, different colors of the marble was added into the interior, which was really amazing to understand, for you to understand the logistics of this material, because we're not talking like uh, 30 centimeters marble tiles. We're talking slabs, and these slabs can be minimum 1.5 meter slabs, and you have massive columns, ornamentation pieces, arches, and the list goes on, and these are all marble pieces. And can you imagine the logistics during that times?
And I'm now curious about, like, how did you do that? How did you carry out the investigation work in this? It's almost like a forensic
Yes.
exercise.
Yeah.
So what are the methods? I'm quite curious. Like, do you actually I mean, of course, historical reference and also citations, for example, you start to realize what were the use of the building, and how did you came out with this outcome in a way? Do you actually do like a scanning of building materials almost?
Yeah. We actually did the part where we want to incorporate scanning is actually it's an ongoing process. This one hasn't finished, by the way. The first part of the research is turned into a installation piece.
Right.
This was also for the Istanbul Design Biennale, but it was the third Istanbul Design Biennale. So this was changed into installation, just to trigger people to engage with what we are doing. But to answer your question, yes, we try to incorporate technology to uncover and to actually do forensic investigation via scanning. We used 3D LiDAR scanning, just to understand the interior in a 3D model kind of way. So we also are planning to actually these marbles are actual marbles from Hagia Sophia, the actual types which are used.
I mean, so the earliest one would be this one, is it?
Yeah.
And then you will progress to here and here.
Yeah. So the recent ones would be on top.
I see. Okay. So like you say, it's an ongoing process. I mean, and also, what do you find the limitation, if there's any, in exploring this or executing this exercise? Do you think that there are certain things, of course, technology, there's a limitation where can't really approach, or do you think that technology able to explore most of the information that you need in scanning through the
I think technology can't capture or is limited to capturing patina. I think patina is in the case of Hagia Sophia, patina was like the icing on the cake, like that is the thing that gave it character. You can see traces of how people move around in the space, like there are certain parts of the marble flooring which has been worn out just by foot traffic, nothing else, just by foot traffic. And it tells you from the patina, like this is how people were behaving in the space, this is how people moved in the space, like how it kind of changed its usage throughout the years. And the emperor, the Christian empire's emperor used to go to the upper floors in a carriage, in a horse carriage, like in the interior, moving with a horse carriage, going upstairs. They had a ramp. They built a ramp there.
Yes.
Like he doesn't even set foot and walk. So he's all the time like being carried there. So, and when this kind of things had been happening in that space, it left a certain mark, and it left a certain character to the space. So the technology really can't capture that. So trying to uncover that through technology was kind of a challenge, and trying to communicate that was kind of a challenge. So as you can see from this, actually this artwork has been made into physical artwork, but I don't have the photo. I don't have the photo. I don't know how, but some things got in the way, and I just couldn't get the photo. But we actually were trying to arrange marble piece by piece like this, and cutting it really thin
Like this.
into no, it's the A part. This one. So it was actually thin pieces of marble which is cut until it's see-through.
Wow. You want to cut? Okay.
Yeah, so it was so fragile, like it's a fragile piece of installation. And why we did that was actually to kind of bring the viewer to transcend in between the layers of Hagia Sophia, in between the layers of the marble, to see through it, because the technology didn't allow you to see through it in terms of visually.
It might come out like an X-ray drawing rather than
so it couldn't capture that beauty of the marble.
Now this reminds me of like Rembrandt or Da Vinci's drawings. There are certain layers. For example, they've done one version. Maybe they are not happy about it. Then they cover with layers of layers.
Exactly.
And now you are now finding the history, and then you realize, oh, perhaps Da Vinci was about to draw a guy rather than a Mona Lisa, for example.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, like you said, like a chariot or like a horse or emperor or something. It's actually unveil the history, and then we realize that perhaps what we read in history perhaps is overturned. Maybe there's like a parallel universe of history that we been believing for wrong time or wrong things for years. It's somehow like uncover or unfold. And I think this is much more, we are looking back in a way to discover rather than designing something new. And I and then I before that I was thinking to talk about generative and reproductive design, where human and technology almost the same. I think we're pretty much on the same page. We believe that Are We Human, this book. And what's your, how do you see about like human and building? Are they, just now we mentioned a few things about like human body is a design, it's a smart design and quite advanced one. And also when comes to a very, very significant architectural period, for example, or style, metabolism or mobile architecture or, archigram, this sort of influence. Can you tell us about this sort of relation in a much more biological, in a much more deeper understanding of human design, especially in evolution? How do you see design in this sense, where architecture is actually like human, or you might disagree with that?
No, actually, I agree with that, because I was actually intrigued with the film, a short film I saw by Charles and Ray Eames. It was called The Power of 10. I don't know if you've seen it
so
before.
it's from the people on the picnic and then go up. Okay, right.
Yeah, and after it goes up, and then to a certain point they go back down, and they enter the eye of the human, and as you look deeper inside, you start to realize that what's inside is actually what is outside.
Mm.
It's actually like resembling, it's like a mirror, you see.
Yeah.
So the human is like kind of like the mirror in between. You yourself are kind of containing something, and you are seeing yourself through the lens of the, let's say, the environment, you know. So to me, like, having that in mind, you know, like architecture, it raised the question, like, can it be done in a way where biology is designing nature, you know. So I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out, like, how can you do that? Because generative design was actually tried to be, I believe the first exploration of that was by the metabolist movement in post-war in Japan, and
Right.
then they presented the manifesto.
Nagasaki Tower, is it?
Yeah,
Something
yeah,
like that.
and then they presented the manifesto
Mm.
at the International Congress of Modern Architecture
Mm.
in the Netherlands, where consequently Team X was there, and at the same time it was moving. So you had in the East, you had the metabolism movement, and then you had the Cubism, and you had the Bauhaus happening at the same time.
Mm.
You
Mm.
had all these things working together. So in a way, it was kind of in that era. I wanted to kind of carry it forward to this era. You know, like the philosophy behind it. So in my work, I tried to kind of design. If you can see the mihrab, the instant mihrab,
Yeah.
and also the ornament below instant mihrab. Can you see
This
this
one.
one? Yeah, this
Oh,
one.
right, right.
Yeah, this one, and also the can you move up, please?
Sure.
Yeah, this one as well. On the left of the mihrab, there is another one.
This one.
Yes, this one. These are all designed from the same geometry, and
Mm.
the geometry is like a script, like a DNA.
Mm.
You know, so I tried to design them as if, for example, the human cell and the cell of a horse. Let's say, for example,
Mm. Mm.
the shape of the cell is actually the same, but how does it multiply, how does it fold, how does it replicate itself? It ends up one as a human and another one as a horse. You understand where I'm going?
Right, right.
Yeah, so I was trying to figure out if this can be done with design as well. Like, can we start off with the same shape and end up with a totally different outcome um, through
It
the
sounds
processes?
it sounds like you key in, let's say, I'm not very familiar with computation design, like for example, like Rhino or Grasshopper, you give an option and then they will come out like tons of patterns or options.
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Like I give you a cube and then you can multiply the cube into like a cancer cell where like
Yeah,
explore and
yeah.
mutate.
This is actually I explored different kind of systems. So basically, the the basic shape. Let's say you have a square, or you
Or
have a
arc,
circle,
right?
okay, or an arch. It can actually be multiplied in various systems, because in nature there is morphogenesis,
Right.
and also there is Y system. Y system is how the three branches start from one, and it goes into two,
Mm.
and then it goes into four, and then it
For
goes.
16,
So
right,
this
right.
is Y system, and then as you can see on the ornaments, these ones are fractal system.
So this one, right.
This one, yeah, this one is fractal. So I tried to use different kind of systems on the same shape, and it gave different outcomes for each system. So you can actually design through computer.
Mm.
Through computational design, you can actually give a different outcome to the end product every time. So it's really interesting, because I was starting with same shapes, and then you know what I use as a basic shape? I used a drawing of a section as a
Ah,
basic shape. So because I wanted to see if the shape of a architectural space, which has the height of the ceiling, which has a opening, which has dimensions, can it create a geometry which is interesting? And if you, I think, can you move down?
yep.
Okay, move down. Yeah, this model,
This one. Yeah.
yeah, this one is from the section. This one is from the section. So as you can see, the process created
Volumes as well.
volumes, openings, and this was and the negative and positive geometries which were created from this generative processes created different interpretations of what it can be in terms of design. So it was, and I tried to build it in layers so that I can study each layer individually. So I studied it in slices.
So okay, this is now just now you were saying like computer or like software allows you to repeat repetition or multiplication multiply so it allows you to multiply things, and now it sounds like building now so software become like, let's say, the creator of human, and then the cell will actually mutate like a computer does. So it's actually like a metaverse, like you say. It's like it's
Yeah,
actually the same theory, but one is computer, one is so-called nature.
yeah. So,
Um, yeah.
so if you, again, going back to what we were discussing, the genesis of how I started with the computational design was actually the film by Ray and Charles Eames,
Mm,
The Power
mm,
of 10. So, in a way, I'm trying to move inwards and explore, what it means to be using the computer as to create something new, but in a virtual realm. So in a way, I'm going more and more in,
mm,
but it actually produces something which kind of wants to exist more and more outside rather than
mm,
inside. So that's how hyper interiority was trying to tie everything with
mm.
what I was talking about.
Yeah. Now I do have a question that perhaps quite out far there. So you were saying like I mean, like you said, like Kenzo Tange and all this metabolists, and also Bauhaus. Well, it's not really about metabolism, but it's rather like a effect after war. Trying to repair or regeneration is the keyword. But then now we do have a new term, perhaps not, maybe not a new term, perhaps like from the 70s or 80s, there comes a thing called biophilic design. I mean, the one is getting closer to nature, but rather than, I mean, you can talk about like biomimicry or design as well. So how do you see that? Like what you are doing,
Hmm.
I think it's much more metabolist. It's rather um understanding the performance and also understanding the design from a biological point of view. But biophilia is rather understanding of human body to react with the natural environment. Like for example, we need to have fresh air and light. That's quite Corbusian idea where we have a flat roof for sunbathing because of the leprosy, yeah, the disease, and and then you have biomimicry, which is much more like Zaha Hadid or Frank Gehry. This kind of follow the fish or follow by a certain geometry from the natural environment. Then how
Yeah.
I'm quite curious, how do you see this in?
Okay, so my work, where it fits in with this narrative, is actually to replicate the process of design in nature.
Mm,
So I'm trying to replicate the process of design, biological processes of design. So more specifically, the process of morphogenesis. Okay,
mm, mm,
so this is the outcome of that exploration. But as you say, it's not something new because biophilic design is actually introduced in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. It was
This guy called Keller or something.
yeah, yeah, and also by another researcher called Kaplan. So they were
Kaplan,
actually interested in the connection between human and nature, and how nature can actually cure certain psychological illnesses, because the modern architecture was making the human ill. So they had to kind of incorporate some kind of nature to kind of become a cure towards this kind of illnesses, psychological and physiological illnesses. So this was biophilic design. And as you mentioned about biomimicry, it's about exploring the potential of organic geometries and how we can actually turn that into some kind of interesting design, because we tend to design things which have angles. We tend to design things which has corners and edges. But in nature, it tends to incorporate more curves, to incorporate more smooth surfaces, parabolics. It has more dome elements, etc., etc. So my works is not trying to be either, but it's just an exploration of the design methods.
Okay, that's I mean that could be another other topic, because and also I found out that a lot of people not able to answer that. In a way, they seems to be there is there's a one party saying that biophilic is like this and then biomimicry is another way around. But I think I'm very, very grateful that you actually say that, because it really makes me to think, okay, there's actually answer there, but it's not really able to define in a way, because we are talking about complexity of nature, where we yet to define nature. What is nature? Do you think plants are nature? Because when we talk about so-called native plants, they are somehow not native, because they might bring from somewhere else, like Australia plant. The Australian plant might come from somewhere. It's not, they call it native. It's not really, we native saying is, and then what defines origin? The origin is so far away, because it's beyond our exploration, because it's like you can say this marble from Hagia Sophia is actually the first, perhaps before there are something that is beyond our research scope, or there's a certain boundary that
Exactly.
we can't really know what is original, what is nature, what is the root in a way. So I think that's pretty much about it, about the theory. I think I do have one maybe last question about your research, and how do you run your practice in a way. It's called Architecture Design Bureau. I would like to ask about the relationship between built works and unbuilt works. Maybe I won't say, built in a sense, there is actually a three-dimensional space where you can experience like interior design. But of course, instant mihrab is also kind of like a built work, because you have space, you have interior, you have dimension, you have volume in this case. But then when it comes to like projects that you did, like interior design, how do you see the complements of, between these two? Or do you think that you actually need to change your mindset, where, commercial projects or educational projects are two different things?
Okay, I think these two sides of my interests, I think they can coexist in one another, because my personal opinion is that if you can draw it, it already exists actually, because it exists but in a different format. You see, like it exists in a format of a sketch, or it exists in a form of a model, but in reality, it actually is existing. So in a way, it doesn't really mean that if it's not built one-to-one scale as you intended, it doesn't mean that it's not actually being built. So To answer your question, like the works that we did under Architecture Design Bureau was because most of the projects that I did there was when I was a lot younger, and you know, I think the my thinking process wasn't as mature as I am now, I could say, but it had that how can I say, it had that evolution. You can see some parts of the evolution. If you can see the project called Open House, it was actually it's actually yeah, this one. So this is actually a play space for children, and you know, the idea behind this was actually to kind of replicate what their house layout plan was. You know, their actual house. This was the layout plan of their house
So
upstairs.
yeah, sorry to interrupt. So this is part
Yeah.
of the like a PPR, is
Yeah,
it? So
yeah. It's a low-cost housing area. Uh, so these kids, yeah, they are living in the city, so you know, they don't have really much choices of where they can play around. So and you know, because of the population of that area, it was a bit crowded. So the number of children can only, and a certain amount of children can play in the playgrounds, and then it will already be full. So we were given a brief where let's try and make more you know, places where it can not only add value to the property aesthetically, but also provide spaces for children and people. So this was intended for children, and you know, because being interior architects, we were concerned about the interior space, and you know, children, when we question the children, like what do you really want, actually, like they, most of them answered that they just really wanted to play at home. You know, being, because of that relationship with the technology, with that relationship with the domestic space. So we decided to kind of, okay, why not we build you a house which is a non-house. Okay, why not we build you a house which is a non-house, and this space is a what we call a projected space. You know, like so this is a projected space of the layout above, and we communicated it in a form of architectural drafting. So in a way, it kind of brought that technical aspect of our background. And so the way the children reacted and used the space is really interesting, because they use it as if it was a real space. You know,
And then they know that there is a line called wall that I shouldn't cross.
yes, and if you can see, they took off their shoes in front of the house. Okay, look at that photo there. Yeah,
Yeah.
just before the door, they took off their shoes and sandals, and so they use the space as a real space. You know, like how they would behave in their house. So I mean, this project had a research background to it. You know, it was not only purely practice, but in a sense, it was a testing out of a new idea and a new concept of a idea that we had. Like, what if it can be this? What if we could provide this? You know, and as you know, tight budgets. Most of the time, for us, it created like original interpretations of of a project. You know, it actually brings about a certain quality to some projects. Yeah.
And I personally find it quite intimate, because I used to work in the project that is about PPR as well.
Yeah.
And then this is like, you know, a very dark area, you know, just
Yeah.
sitting above, perhaps like 30 stories residential above. And I find this project very, very interesting, because it question our understanding and sensitivity to numbers. Like, what is 600 nm? Is like this, but when you inside a room, when you place a furniture, then you will feel actually cramped than what we should have, because of wall, because of enclosure, because of there's a you know, there's a circulation that there's interrupted by lots of things. I think when it comes to works, of course, they are both research based, which is rather like on paper and more thoughts and more research and more studies, and they are built stuff like, for example, like this one, open house. And you also did other things like OG table, which I quite like because it's like quite one of the earliest work to see perhaps the before the research brainwash like a brainwash into it's like injecting into your new much more mature thinking. And
Yeah.
also like I find there's a similarity between Yuna concert and also the installation like inverted volume.
Yeah.
So there is actually this talking about this kind of mutation-ish kind of. It reminds me of Venom, the one in the Spider-Man
Oh, I see.
movie. Yeah, it's like this kind of a connectivity, but yet it's so complicated. You can't really find which line is which line is. It's
Mm.
exploded into a certain sense.
Mm.
But there is one special questions for you actually. I was thinking about to ask, which is the uni office. Um, so it's for the rector. It's a rector office.
Mhm.
But I find the reason why I find it very special because one is because of your artworks. They are much more organic. They are much more
Mhm.
complicated. They are much more chaotic in a sense. It's controlled, but it's chaotic because there is actually quite organic. There's quite free flow. While in this project, which I really like to ask is because it's so organized. And but yet there is actually a certain chaotic going on here. I mean, in a good way. It's not like bad chaotic. There is actually a certain irregularity going on. And while here you can see how do we understand of proportion, order, like
Mm.
Corbusier, this kind of a two half idea or three half like grid and orientation. How do you find this, this particular project? But I'm really curious, what do you think?
Okay, so for this project, as you said, I partnered up with my wife for this project. That she
Mm-hmm.
was also involved in the design of this particular piece. So the thing that we are going for here is, you see, she's more the organized person. Okay.
Okay.
So yeah, so in the way we try to make sense of each other's strength. So we try to work within a grid, but trying to also incorporate chaos inside it. So
Hmm.
as you can see from the arrangement of the panels, like the rectangles and squares, these were actually experimentations from the design process of the Alhambra uh, a concept of how they built or how they drew the structures in Alhambra, the palace.
Hmm. Hmm.
So it was more like mathematical and proportional
Hmm.
geometries in a way. So we worked within a grid, but we tried to keep like a chaotic visual in that grid. So it's like a controlled chaos, yeah. And we tried to provide this kind of aesthetic because the university was accepting a lot of international students at that
Hmm.
time, and we wanted to kind of show or reflect that in the design as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, like not one is arranging the structure.
Hmm.
It's like a collective background of people who are
Hmm.
making up the university. Yeah.
So it's the keyword is more like diverse but yet random and but
Yeah.
it's organized and
Yeah.
controlled. Right, right. Yes, I think this is quite interesting as well. I mean, lots of work. I can see the fishing net, and this one is a Yuna concert.
Yeah.
So this one is with lots of effort and also more. I mean, this is more. I mean, there's one more question is because, like you said, perhaps there's a random, there's chaotic, but then there is a certain control. But I mean, because I do believe there is a particular works that I really like, but I'm not sure who did that. But I always draw it in my sketchbook. It's actually like a grid, but yet there's a amoeba or amoeba inside this grid. You can go crazy about this frame. It's like a contained chaotic. Um, But how, I mean, there must be a certain control, because I believe that the grid is the boundary. So you can go crazy, but then you must stay inside this box. So so if that's the case, then what's the box that in your definition do you think that there must be lines as as a common language, or do you think dots as a single language, or there's a certain principle in your design? Do you think there is there's a fundamental element in your design? Do you realize, or do you think that there is no, not really there is?
I think for me it's the shape. Like the shape is the boundary. Like it's not a line or it's not like a dot, but it's the shape. And the shape where I'm talking about is can be something which is limiting, limiting the design, or it can be something which is producing the design. You know, it can be replicated into like a pattern, or you know, I don't know if you are familiar with pattern language.
A book, yeah.
Yeah, a book called Pattern Language. I think it can be, maybe that one is another topic, but you know, it's interesting because no one really ever asked me this question before, and I find it interesting. But I see my fundamental is the shape. Yeah. Yeah.
Shape. Oh, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's
I
the
mean,
shape.
it's like back to basic. It's like we talk about cube, pyramid, sphere,
Yeah.
but then it's actually like, I mean, I do agree. It's like so towards a new architecture by Corbusier, he actually talks about basic things, and then he believes that those are the fundamentals. And actually, let's say a rectangle is actually based from a cube, for example.
Yeah.
So rectangle is because you enlarge the thing, then it becomes and another thing is because Zaha did this I think it was a cultural center. It's a center in America, which the one with a lot of cubes from the facade. I mean, with a box, which is very, very not Zaha, but inside, yes, there's curved wall and everything. But when you compare to where's this place? The one with the curve, Istanbul? No, not Istanbul. The one, Kazakhstan, is it? Somewhere in Kazakhstan with the
Yeah.
Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan.
Azerbaijan, yes,
Yeah.
yes. So there is actually like different, but yet there is the language is more like deconstructive. So that's the language. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that's pretty much about it. I think we had a really, really long conversation. Thanks a lot, Daniel. I think we can
You're welcome.
definitely we can even come out with a book, talk about
Okay.
your works. But final my one last request would be, would you mind to throw a question for our audience to, or you can throw it to me or throw it to yourself, one open question for us to reflect and ponder upon.
Okay, so I think my question is for all our listeners, and including yourself. I think try to think about the process of design rather than
The outcome.
the outcome. Yeah, because I think the process is kind of like the area where most architects talk about the process, but we somehow get lost in that. And um, I think the key here is to kind of break it down and try to understand it better. You know, like once we understand it better, we can actually kind of control in a way where we're heading, but not actually limiting our creativity, but trying to make sense of design, what I'm trying to say. Yeah. So
Hmm.
I think it's something where we can kind of think and move out from there. And another thing is also, um, as were talking before about the hyper interiority, I think
Hmm.
try to have a look into this concept of the environment. Um, I don't know if we should kind of keep going in that direction of
Hmm.
creating more and more interior spaces,
Hmm.
or should we kind of try to break it up and open up our spaces more?
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot. I think I have one more last fun question I would like to ask. Do you believe there is a parallel universe where some part of the world there will be another Daniel?
Yeah, I think there is another parallel world. Yeah, because just to give an example, for example, Gary in Instagram, and Gary
Ah,
in as a person that I'm talking to right now. You are maybe a different person in Instagram. You know, you show a different side of you because
right.
your interiority, your you know, how you make sense of your subjectivity in that realm is different as compared to how you are in the real world. So there is a parallel uh, world in that sense, you know.
Interesting. So I can't wait to come back to Malaysia and meet you, maybe let you see another
Yeah,
interiority.
yeah. Please, I'd love to meet you in person as
Yes,
well. Yeah.
hopefully soon. Okay. Thanks a lot,
Yeah.
Daniel, and
All right.
really
Thank
appreciate your
you.
time and wonderful sharing session. And we can keep in touch, definitely.
Definitely.
Thanks a
Thank you.
lot. All right.
Thank
All the best to you, and then we will talk later. Cheers.